It's Baseball at the Corner. This is the Michigan in Trouble podcast with your hosts, Alex S. Freeman and Luke Jatonis.
Well, Luke, we just said it right before we came on the air. You said kind of a slow news week after we got the big announcement.
Yeah, pretty much.
But that doesn't mean we're without things to talk about this week. But I certainly will take a slow news week over the back and forth haggle of the previous few news cycles in terms of the world of Major League Baseball.
I think I would take a 17-hour lecture on Al Avila explaining me the concept of rebuilding over having to haggle over baseball labor laws and contracts and prorated salaries. I think I would do damn near anything to not have to go through that again.
Well, Luke, you're in luck. Let's bring in special guest Al Avila. Buckle in, folks. We've got a 7-hour episode. No, that'd be fun. I would take Al Avila for 7 hours. I don't know.
I think actually around very therapeutic for me.
I would run out of things to ask him, but
yeah, it'd be therapeutic for me because I think, as I said, I'm definitely trying to bury the hatchet. So he and I, maybe my arch nemesis now becomes like my sweet dear friend who I vacation with 2 times a year. So Al, if you're listening and you're watching this, buddy, let's go to Boca.
Hey, that sounds a little Michigan in Trumbull retreat to Boca with Al Avila. Actually, I think that it's really interesting because we'll get into this in this episode of things of like considerations of the 60-game season, and I really think that this is a season where Al can really prove himself to be the correct heir apparent to Dave Dombrowski, and he could even supersede Dave as in my head of great Tigers general managers.
That's a big claim. That's a big claim for Avila to overtake Dombrowski. And I've said it, a couple weeks ago. I've been very impressed with how Al Avila has handled not only everything with COVID-19 and what the organization has gone through, what baseball has gone through. It's clear he did a phenomenal job at the draft. So those things are all good, but he's still got a long way to go. He's got a lot to do, a long way to go, in my book at least, kind of overwrite and redo some of the wrongs from the past 2 seasons because there have been a lot of them. So, although I think right now his stock is good, I can't just say in full confidence that I am super pleased with everything he's done. What I saw in 2019 still wakes me up in the middle of the night in a fever and cold sweat. So, yeah, but no, it'll be interesting. I do think you raise a good point. This is a good chance for everybody to kind of prove their worth and their merit, so to speak, because 60 games, let's see how we handle it. It's going to be interesting. I was golfing yesterday with a mutual friend who was on the show, Tom, the great Tom Souls, the A's fan, for those who might remember from a few weeks ago. Tom the A's fan. That's his nickname on the show. We were both talking after we got done golfing, and he brought up a good point of, look at last year's season. I don't remember their numbers right off the top of my head, but the Washington Nationals, who ended up winning the World Series in 2019, they started out the gate like 19-31 or something like that. Like, they did not have a good start out of the gate. Like, in the middle of May, they were, I think, well below 500. So teams like that, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how good you are, the star talent you've got on your team, who's your manager, doesn't matter. If teams like that get out to a slow start this season, it's, I think, going to be the kiss of death. You have very little room to kind of wiggle with in order to have a successful and a potential World Series winning season in 2020. The margin of error is really so slim that it's going to really, we said it on our little mini show Thursday, every game will count. So
yeah, through 60-ish, the Nationals were 28-34. So obviously that's 62 games that they had gotten at that point in the season. But yeah, 28-34,
that's not going to do
World Series champion Washington Nationals. So
yeah,
that's the fascinating thing. So we've got the trade deadline is set at August 31st, which is sort of smack in the middle of the season, right at about the 30-game mark. And as we'll kind of get into here in the show, and not to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but as we look at like spring training 2.0, one of the things that we'll look at there is that we're not playing a lot of games in spring training this time around. And so the first couple weeks of the season are really going to be a lot of those. We're going to see a lot of that spring training kind of stuff happening, where these guys are trying to like get back into shape. What does it mean to play in a game? What do all these things look like? Because you keep in mind they've been away from baseball for 3 months, almost 4 at this point, and by the time we get games rolling, so that's a long time not having played in competitive games. And it's not like they've been able to go to like they couldn't just like go pick up in a league in the Dominican Republic. They had to just stay home.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of interesting for the Tigers is they've in a really kind of weird and you could say sad way, they've had 2 off seasons almost in the calendar year, because they weren't playing in October baseball last year. So they were pretty much off from October to February. I mean, I know pitchers and catchers kind of start migrating down south in January, early February, whatever, but pretty much 4 months there. They play for, I don't know, 6 weeks or so, 6 to 7 weeks, if that. And then they get shut down again.
It was about 2 weeks worth of games, a little bit more than that.
And so they were probably at camp for like a week before that. So we're looking at, I mean, saying a month is probably even, is being too generous. But so they're at spring training for a very short amount of time. And then here we are again, picking it up, and they're kind of off season part 2. And it's almost another 4 months. I mean, by the time they left camp in March to getting their first game played in July, it will almost have been 4 months. Of the Tigers probably are really chomping at the bit. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are like hungry to play, but them in particular, I mean, they haven't really played, it feels like, since September of last year. So, and I don't even know if I would say what they were doing last season as playing, but I'll leave it at that.
Off since 20.
We've been off since the third week of April of 2019, pretty much. That's what we had. So, but no, it'll be. I mean, it is that. Hey, these guys should be well rested. That's for sure. And I mean, they got so well rested to the point where, remember, I think we talked about this on a few weeks ago, but it's been the Tigers website has been kind of covering the story pretty heavily. Michael Fulmer was only supposed to come back middle of the season, and now here we are. He's going to potentially start the season in the rotation. I mean, so Miggy has had this is the most time off you would imagine in terms of gameplay that Miggy has had in years. So, I mean,
certainly, like almost certainly since he started his major league career. Like
you'd have to imagine. I mean, he in 2018, he had the bicep thing, so that like knocked him out like in the beginning of June. So, I mean, he had all that downtime. But even then, the kind of the same story with Miggy. He gets hurt. He rests for 4 or 5 months, comes back, says he feels good. About a month and a half to 2 months in, lingering issues start to kind of come back to the surface. So this is a ton of time for him to get his body in great shape, which we have said a bajillion times on the show he has done. So, the future's looking good in that aspect, and it's going to be exciting overall. I mean, like we said, baseball is baseball.
So, Luke, with this, I want to throw a hypothetical to you kind of right off the bat as we talk about Al Avila. You think about, we get to August 31st.
Yeah.
And if you're a team that's hovering around 500, you have to think that you're 100% in the mix of teams. Most of the time when you arrive at the trade deadline, if you're around 500, you're in the mix to try and make a run for the playoffs. I think that we'll have even more teams in that position this time around, because you think about some of those early season games, like you get a lot more win one day, lose the next day patterns happening. You don't really have a lot of streaks running. So if you're Al Avila and the Detroit Tigers and you arrive at this trade deadline 15-15.
Wow, right at that 500 mark, huh?
What do you want to see the Tigers do?
Oh God. So in years past, I would have said 100% you go for it, because there's no guarantee that the next season will be, that you'll be in the same spot next season. This one's just so different because it's like there's only even if you make that big trade, even after the fact, you're only getting that player for maybe 30 games. If you miss out on the playoffs, it's like, was it worth it? I guess what I would like to see is if they're going to make a move, that's fine. I'm never going to ever knock a team for trying to go for it and for winning. 60 games, 162 games. Your main goal should be to win games, point blank, period. However, or I guess what I would say, my kind of caveat on that would be is I don't want to see them, nor do I think we would see them making some sort of ludicrous trade where they're trying to go out. Let's say they need a big bat in this hypothetical. I don't see a circumstance or a situation where they need that big bat and they deal a guy like Matt Manning. Mm-hmm. I don't see that happening at all. But that is also kind of like my one thing of like, even if I don't see it happening, I don't want that to happen, if that makes sense. Yeah. I understand we want to win. It'd be great to win a World Series, even if it's kind of a 60 game, there'll be an asterisk next to it. But we have to also be mindful of the future. And that's not me saying tank games on purpose or lose games on purpose. It's just a fact. This season is shorter. And, it's at the point by the time we get games going, it's just going to be so quick. Everything's going to end so quickly. Like I would not want to see us sink our ship now just at a chance at winning 60. But at the same time, I don't want to see us just tank on purpose to tank. That doesn't, I honestly think with the team we have now, we're going to be competitive. I really, really do. And I think kind of the cool thing the Tigers have at their disposal is if they get to that scenario where they're 15-15, let's say, and they need a bat, maybe you go out, you get a bat, you don't give up, the entire farm system, but maybe give up a lower class guy that we don't know, a single A, double A name that we're just kind of like unfamiliar with. There's no way guys like Manning, Mize, Faedo, Skubal, those guys aren't going anywhere. So even that little hypothetical I threw out, it was stupid of me because that's just not going to happen at all.
The franchise is clearly all in on those guys.
Yes, 100%. But the kind of cool thing is to kind of bounce off those names in the event they need some pitching. Well, you don't need to go out and, sign a guy like, I don't even know what his contract is. But you don't need to go out and get a Verlander or a Craig Kimbrell or whatever free agent pitcher you could maybe go out and make a trade for that's going to be a free agent next season. Instead of doing that, you could say, well, we're 15-15. We're not necessarily going to win, but we're not completely out of it. Maybe we give Casey Mize a chance. Maybe we go out and give Alex Faedo a chance. It'd be just something to think of. I think it'd be kind of curious to see. And that's one of the things the Tigers have going for them because they have so much arm talent in their minor league system. Hitting is a little bit different. Other than Torque and Riley Green, there's not like a ton of mega star hitters, at least on the horizon. I'm sure we're going to have guys like Derek Hill, Daz Cameron, Paredes, Parker Meadows. Those guys are going to be good, no doubt about it. But like the Torques and everything like that, those are the real, he's our number 3 hitter. And I'm not being me when I say that, but he is the big power hitter of the future.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that could be really interesting is in a scenario where the Tigers are 15-15 at that deadline is that you will have a lot of other teams that are also competitive, and so I don't know that there will be I don't think there will be really any teams that are in sell mode, but there may be some teams that are looking to make kind of a weird little deal that, like, if they need something to bulk up their rotation. I would love to see the Tigers, as much as I like having Jordan Zimmerman on the roster, but like a guy like Jordan Zimmerman, who can go, who can be your 4th, 5th guy in the rotation, really solid option for you. I would love to see us like option him for a decent bat to go into the lineup, and then we bring up one of those other pitchers and we say, hey, let's roll the dice on these guys, on this young guy, and see how he does. Because what the worst thing that happens is that we end up at 30-30 or 20-40.
It's going to be so interesting, and I think I said this when we got the announcement last week that the season was going to happen. Obviously, we want our team to win. We're not going out there to tank games, to throw, lose games on purpose for the rebuild. I've made my opinions clear on that in the past. But at the same time, too, if we go out there this season and we go 10-40, or excuse me, it could be more, or let's say we go 20-40, whatever it might be. I'm not gonna lose a lot of sleep over it. I mean, it's 60 games. Obviously, you want to see the team go out there and represent and play at a competitive and professional level, but it's not like I'll be as mad as I was with 2019 or 2018 for that matter too, of kind of just at times it seems like there's promise and then just the wheels completely fall off the wagon. So it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see. And also, I think we have to give everybody on, all around baseball, we have to kind of approach the season with a grain of salt. Like, this is unprecedented. At least in all the years that I've been a fan, we've never had a shortened season to 60 games with a pandemic still going on in the midst of the season. So it's going to be, I have to tell this to myself too, because I'm sure when games get going and we lose a game late because of a blown save or whatever, I'm going to be flying off the handle. But like, we have to remember kind of outside of the game what's going on, and just that this is not normal. None of what has happened in 2020 has been a normal year by any stretch of the imagination. So especially when it comes to baseball, sometimes let cooler heads prevail, and let's just enjoy the season for what it is. Hopefully they go out there, they kick some ass. I have no doubt they will. And I think they are going to be a good team. I think they have potential to definitely surprise people, because the thing I keep going back to is how many teams do we see start off hot, then, flail out through the rest of the season? Well, now there's really not any time to kind of gas out, so to speak. It's, hey, if you can get off to a hot start those first 20, 25 games and then just play 500 baseball the rest of the way, you have a very good chance at going to the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and so I think that brings us to, one of the things that I'm definitely very interested in, more so than how the action on the field unfolds, is how Gardy and Al manage the roster and players, which brings us to Spring Training 2.0. So let's take a look at kind of what we know about what Spring Training will look like. So the Tigers will be holding Spring Training at Comerica. The alternative location in Secondary Park, where the taxi squad will reside, will be Toledo, home of the Mud Hens. So that's where we'll have the other 30 guys on the taxi squad down there playing against each other every day, which will be good. Good for those guys to play against each other and get that work in. That's where you'll see a lot of our hot prospects will be down there to start the season. So we'll have a lot of inter-squad play during spring training. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic reports that teams will be allowed to schedule 3 exhibition games leading up to opening day. And if they are in a market that is not close to another team, where they can schedule them so that there's not a ton of travel happening across the country for these teams, they are able to schedule that game against typically their opening day opponent was the. So what we'll likely see is we'll get that opening day schedule. And I think that we'll see a lot of guys and teams schedule in like the week leading up to opening day, 3 games against that opponent, whoever that might be. So you'll end up playing probably 7 straight-ish games against, we may play the White Sox seven times in a row in that regard. Yeah. But so that's kind of what spring training is going to look like initially. So Luke, what are your thoughts on the highly, highly abbreviated and lacking in spring training games?
That's going to be interesting. I think one thing we're going to definitely see as once spring training wraps up, when spring training 2.0 is no more, and then we go to the regular season, a lot of our starting pitching, especially, you're going to be seeing a lot of these starting pitchers those first few weeks. I think we're going to see a lot of their starts in the regular season be more like spring training starts. I mean, it's impossible to ask a guy like Matt Boyd, who I'm sure has been working out and preparing as best as he can throughout all of this, to essentially go from sitting on your couch for 3 to 4 months, all of a sudden to be spring training for 3 weeks, back to games in less than a month from today. And, these guys are pros, are the best in the world at what they do. So I have no doubt that they will try to rise to the task as best they can. But they're going to have to, when the regular season rolls around, our starters, they're just going to have spring training starts, those first 3 to 4, maybe 5 starts, until they can kind of get their arms worked up, get their innings where they want to be at. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But in general, 3 games is not a lot. I'm almost kind of surprised they can't do more than that. Kind of how we were saying before we started recording, Alex, was maybe just have like 3 or 4 teams meet up in a central location and just do round robin games for like, a weekend or something. I don't know. Obviously everything, with the geographical location, that's going to kind of be the big sticking point, because we have to make sure everyone is being safe. And, we also may not want to be doing as many exhibition games with the potentially being exposed to other teams, because there's more of a risk then to potentially contract COVID. I mean, we've already kind of seen that there, and I know we're going to get to it in a little bit, but the numbers amongst major leaguers have been rising, as they have been all across the country, it seems, especially in states down south. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. 3 games is not a lot. It's not a lot at all, but as I said a little bit earlier, we just kind of have to roll with the punches. This is unprecedented territory for us. So let's just make the best that we can of it and hope everyone gets as much work as they can. And you kind of said it, I think. You're going to see a lot of inner squad matchups leading up to the regular season. But also, I think, again, we as fans have to know those first few weeks, especially for our starting pitchers, I would be shocked if Matt Boyd came out, who I'm assuming will be named our opening day starter, I would hope.
Gardy still hasn't done it.
He hasn't done it yet. I saw that. I saw that. He hasn't said anything. He's probably like, I don't know, folks. I just want to play baseball. I'll figure out the rest later. But I would, in a hypothetical world where Matt Boyd is the opening day starter, I don't see him going out and throwing a 9-inning complete game. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it. I don't see it right now because of the, definitely want to limit pitchers, their innings and things like that. Got to preserve that arm. We got 60 games to play. We don't have time to have more people banged up. So
you also have to think about like those, depending on where you schedule those 3 exhibition games, do you even want to put your opening day starter into one of those games, because you got to think about where it's going to fall in the rest cycle. Like maybe you have them come in and do the first 2 innings of the first spring training game. And that to me is wild to get ready for opening day of the season.
Also, are you going to so the Tigers will be able to request 3 spring training games kind of at their leisure. I'm assuming it's not like the last 3 games of the spring training schedule are going to be the exhibition games. Is it just like you can pick 3 throughout? I'm kind of curious how that will work. Is it? I mean,
I'm not sure how the scheduling will actually end up working, but it is going to be, they're going to be allowed three games. That's what they get.
You know what though? Now that I say that out loud, it could very well be where they do they do as much of their drills and just kind of getting back together that first week or so. Then maybe they start moving to inner squad games for, a week or 2. And then it might be, we're starting the season on the 23rd. Maybe it's something where it's like July 19th or July 20th up until the 22nd. They want those games back to back to back to rev up to get as close to opening day as possible. I don't know. This is so out of the ordinary for us. We're going to much like everybody in Major League Baseball, we as fans, we just have to kind of accommodate and go along for the ride. So we'll see.
And that's when you have to feel good about having a veteran manager like Gardy.
Exactly.
Kind of making a lot of these decisions, because he's he's essentially going to be making roster choices without seeing these guys in games, just based on what he's seen, like of what he saw in the spring. We had 54 guys still in camp when everything got shut down. And so we obviously won't have all 54 of those guys back with us, but we will have a good number of them. Plus we'll have some of these new additions. And so Gardy's going to be making a lot of decisions, whittling down from 60 to 30 for opening day, based on basically nothing. Based on how they do in practice.
I mean, you'd have to imagine right now, they already have probably a good sense as to who's making the team and who, I don't think there's going to be like any knockout, brawls of who fighting over positions, things like that. So we'll see. You are right though. I think I said it last week. We definitely are at an advantage as are many teams throughout the majors who have that veteran manager presence right now. And not to throw shade, as the young children say, but a guy like David Ross, I look at for the Cubs, former player, first year rookie manager, and now not only does he have to deal with all of that, but on top of that, everything going on in the world with coronavirus, these rules, 60-game season, roster cuts, taxi squads. It just sounds like a headache. So, and, even for Gardy, it's going to be different. It's not like he's used to this either, but I just feel more comfortable having that veteran manager presence at the helm than I would having a young kind of first or second year coach. Not knocking David Ross. Now, what's going to happen. The Cubs are going to win the World Series this year, and I'm going to have to come back 3 or 4 months.
They're going to go 60-0, and you're going to say,
and I'm going to have to say, okay, and I retire. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, Gardy, and in Gardy we trust, and this is for guys like Gardy. This is a contract year for him. I believe he had a 3-year deal. This is year 3 of that contract, so we're definitely going to be going into the off season. And we'll see what happens. I can also, as I've said, extend Matt Boyd. Can we please re-sign Gardy after this year? Because again, we don't have much to go off of, but we can at least see, down the road, a brighter and a clearer picture of what this team may look like. And I just hate it when you have these managers who are through all the crap parts, and it's like, okay, and now we're getting good, and you got to go. So. Yeah. It'll be interesting, but yeah, Gardy's the man, and I have nothing but faith in him.
So as we were talking about, so you'll have 60 guys reporting to camp this week, and so this week's really going to be all about intake testing. They're obviously all going to get tested for COVID-19. They will take both a antibody test and whatever the test is called that tells you if you actively have COVID-19. I am 2 degrees in theater. I'm not a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination. What? I've never even played one on TV.
I never played a doctor either. I don't think.
Yeah. Nope. Well, yeah. You and I, we don't have the.
Yeah, I'm not Clooney.
Yeah. Who are we? George Clooney?
I wish. That'd be awesome.
That would be great.
Yeah.
But so only 3 spring training games. So then we look into the first few weeks of this season, and it's going to feel like spring training in a lot of ways. You've alluded to that. So let's look at that. So the Tigers' record through 60 games last season, we went 23-37.
Oh my!
In those 60,
God.
In those 60
14.
Games,
is that 14 games under 500?
It is
23-37.
14 games under 500. But if you think about a team that finished as poorly as the Tigers did, that's a pretty decent record through the first 60.
I guess you got to spin it some way, but good Lord, 14 games under 500. Well,
and then here's the past.
Here's
the record through the first 2 weeks of spring training this year. So in spring training this year, they went 8-9-2, so 2 ties in there. So hovering right around 500 there. Mm-hmm. You think about those 2 ties. If we played extra innings, who knows what might have happened in that scenario, especially with a runner starting on second this year. And
that's a great point.
So the Tigers could have as easily been 10-9 through the 19 games that we played in spring training. So right there, right about that 500 mark. So it feels like, I agree that it feels like, based on all of these rule changes and the weirdness of the season and all of that going on, you think about a lot of these young guys who probably still live at their parents' house. These young guys, when they're not, with their major league team, and those parents had obviously invested a lot of money in their children's baseball careers, and so had setups at home to kind of continue training in a significant way. Yeah. You'd think that the Tigers, who came out fairly well in spring training this year, will do the same thing coming out again.
Yeah. I think they have all the capability to do that. I mean, even last year, I've said it on the show in the past, even in last year, 2019 was atrocious, but those first few weeks, they were right around the 500 mark. So every single team is going to be in it. They're in it until they're not this year, really. And that's how it works. And I don't care if you're the Houston Astros, the LA Dodgers, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Chicago Cubs, the New York Yankees. It doesn't matter if you're the biggest marketed team or a smaller market like Oakland or Tampa Bay. Every team is in it. And that's just the facts. And yes, with those numbers alone, going right around 500 through the first, that'd probably be 20 games somewhere in that ballpark. That's, that's a third of our season right there. Yeah. So, hey man, why not? Why not? Why not us? I mean, honestly, why not us? Why can't we? I mean, we'll see. If I have all the faith in the world, and I think that's going to probably come back to bite me in the ass to start off with. But I think that with this new, it's just there's just a different feel with this team lately. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because we really haven't seen them play baseball since September of last year. And if you want to say like competitive baseball to early 2019 or 2018. So it's been a while, but I don't know. Do you agree with me? Do you just feel like can you feel the change in the organization?
Yeah, there's something in the air, so to speak. Like it feels like the team is going to be more. I was reading a lot of articles like looking down the road in this rebuilding process and talking about trying to time when all of these hot prospects kind of come up so that you can win for the longest amount of time with them. But it just feels like the team and the roster are going to be ready earlier than anyone thinks that they're going to be ready. And that's not talking about like guys like Riley Green coming up into the organization. Like it feels like this will be a competitive team before those guys hit the roster, and I'm not saying they're going to be World Series champions, but they're going to be a team that's going to feel like they're in the mix. Like I feel like we're in the mix this year in a way that I haven't felt in a really long time.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was like, okay, at what point are the wheels going to fall off the bus of this thing? Like you talk about the start in 2019, it felt like a fine start to 2019. We were like, okay, these guys they're doing something. It's all right. And then the wheels completely fell off the bus.
Yeah.
And because of the 60 game season, I don't feel like at any point I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, the wheels may fall off the bus, but they could also fall off the bus for the Washington Nationals. They could fall off the bus for the Tampa Bay Rays, who is a team that is going to be very competitive in this environment based on the way their roster is built. And so it just feels like, because baseball is such a streaky game, that this roster is as good as anybody else in a 60 game sample. There's one name in particular that I am so excited to see, and I'm very sad that we are only going to see him for 60 games, maybe next year to 2021 if he were to be re-signed or whatever, another contract. CJ Cron. I think we all keep forgetting that we have CJ Cron. That dude is a beast. He can mash the hell out of the ball, and if it's against left-handed pitching, forget about it. The dude is on a different level. He really, really just demolishes left-handed pitching. So guys like that, guys like this new kind of Terminator-esque Miggy that we're seeing, Nico Goodrum, who we know puts in the work, our boy Kristen Stewart, who we know we're big fans of him. We think he's the best. Want to see him kind of get his due. It's going to be awesome. And a lot of these dudes are just going to really kind of crush it, I think, and I'm excited to see it. I also feel like I've been thinking a lot about the movie The Replacements lately, and I feel like the Tigers roster is kind of like built with a lot of these guys that are like nearing the end of a deal, that are on 1 year deals, that are just kind of that are like theoretical placeholders that the organization has until these prospects are ready. And so there's truly the motivation of like, there is no tomorrow for you if you don't show up for these 60 games. And so that's one reason also why I have felt great confidence that the Tigers roster, sort of from top to bottom, more than anybody else, has been at home working and getting ready for this season, because there is no tomorrow for a lot of these guys in this franchise if they don't step up and play, because there is so much talent behind them that is just like waiting in the wings for their moment and has like a little bit more development to do. And then they will gladly take that starting job. And so these guys either want to make the organization think twice about potentially trading the talent away, or they want to get a deal with another franchise as they leave this place. And so they're very motivated to play at the top of their game.
Right now, just a number that just kind of came to me off my head, and just kind of thinking about where I think this team is at. Obviously, we think pitching is going to be strong, even if it's not guys like Mize and Manning. With those guys, I think the lineup is going to just be leagues better than it was last year. And for whatever the bullpen is still kind of whatever. I'm not still totally sold on that, but maybe we'll kind of see it as the season progresses. I got this team right now. It's in my head, number off the top of my head, winning around 34 games.
Yeah, that feels right to me.
34, 35 in that ballpark.
Yeah, that I feel like we can be right there, because you feel like you're gonna win. We're gonna win the majority of our games against the Royals. If we can go 5-5 against the Twins, that's great. We can go 6 or 7 wins against the White Sox, and probably another 6 or 7 against the Indians. All that feels really, really possible.
Beating Cleveland for us has always been really tricky. I don't know what's happened, but the last few years beating Cleveland for the Tigers has that's been our kryptonite essentially. So you're going to have to definitely step up and win those games there. But got to remember too, you're going to get 5 games against the Pirates, 5 games against the Cincinnati Reds, a team that people think in theory is going to be good, but we kind of got to see it to believe it. I do think they will be very good, by the way, the Cincinnati Reds, Cubs, Brewers, Cardinals. So it's going to be.
We get those games against that Cubs team that you just mentioned with a rookie manager and a weird season. And so I think that's that's advantageous. It's certainly better than if we had the Cubs in August of a normal season, like where where he's had time to kind of figure out how to handle some games. And so you get him into a weird situation where you give the manager an opportunity to make a mistake and suddenly it's a stolen win on the road,
no disrespect to David Ross, but he's no Joe Madden. He's got massive shoes to fill as is. He's replacing the man who brought a World Series championship to the city of Chicago for the Cubs, that is, at least, for the first time in over 100 years. So he's got very big shoes to fill, but, we'll kind of see how that all goes down the road. But I don't want to I know we're not trying to get like super into projections. That's not really this episode today. We'll get to that in a few weeks, but I don't see a reason why these guys can't compete. I think we've got such a strong crop of talent all across the board. And although I don't think, I'm not sitting here saying World Series champs, saying it now, I think they're going to be competitive. I think any team is going to be competitive in a 60-game season. The Florida Marlins are going to be competitive for all we know. The Mariners, these kind of bottom of the basement teams that we're kind of associated with a lot of times, all of them are going to have a chance. So we'll see what happens, us included.
Yeah, and so I think that one of the things too that is sort of lingering over this season is the many potential complications that the ongoing pandemic continue to bring about. So I wanted to take a few minutes here in this episode to kind of talk about some of those potential COVID-19 complications. And so the bottom line being this: MLB knows that more COVID cases will develop throughout this season. We're already at about 40 or so cases that we know about within the league, a couple of those in the Tigers organization. And the number will certainly rise as we go to intake testing. You have to remember that we're going to have some 1,800 to 2,000 players and staff members taking COVID tests this week within Major League Baseball. And so certainly some of those are going to come back positive that we don't know about. And we will see that number to continue to go up. So what happens if and when a player tests positive? Jeff Passan reported this out for us. So we get two. So you must then have 2 negative COVID-19 tests taken at least 24 hours apart, no fever for at least 72 hours while not using fever suppressing medicine, and no respiratory systems as judged by a doctor or team medical staff. And then and this is an interesting one here, that team physician and a joint committee consisting of 2 doctors and 1 non-medical representative from MLB and the MLBPA deem that the person does not pose a risk of spreading infection. Now you have to think that in general, that committee is going to kind of rubber stamp some stuff once you have like these, obviously there's like clear medical tests that the people can take that will kind of give them the data that they need. But there is going to be a committee that is going to approve players coming back into that scenario. So all of that to be said, there's going to be rosters that you're going to suddenly have guys not available to you because they're going through not concussion protocol, but COVID protocol.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting kind of thing we're all going to have to kind of consider, among many other things to consider with this season. Obviously, and I don't know if I saw Passan tweet, or maybe it was a quote from Gardy that he was talking about it. I could be totally wrong here, but it was along the lines of saying, not only do you have to worry about your guys performing, but one thing that's going to be a huge factor in your success or failure this season is keeping your guys healthy. It's fair to say that maybe the team who stays just the healthiest this year wins. That's kind of going to be interesting. One thing I don't know if maybe you know this, Alex. Maybe you could explain it to me if you do. We had a player, I believe, test positive in the Tigers organization last week. Now, obviously, for confidentiality reasons, they're not going to reveal who that is. But throughout the season, if, let's say, Jacoby Jones tests positive for coronavirus, the third week of the season, will they then reveal that he has tested positive, or will it just be like Jacoby Jones is no longer available for 2 weeks?
Yeah, I have to assume that they won't like officially report that Jacoby Jones has tested positive for the coronavirus, but I do know that there's been talks of the the coronavirus disabled list is not the same as the other injured lists, and so the rules are slightly different because there's a different protocol for those guys to come back into play. And so like there's all of the kind of ancillary things that we will know that Jacoby Jones is not playing because he has tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, just real quick, everybody, that is a hypothetical.
Yeah, Jacoby Jones.
We have no idea about Jacoby Jones's
I hope
status.
He doesn't. That dude's fast. We need him in center. That guy is a home run robbing machine. So Jacoby, if you're listening or watching, we don't want you to get the coronavirus. So please stay 6 feet away from everybody.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. I did see a lot of reporting as well of veteran guys saying that they have planned already a first meeting when they get to camp to kind of really lay it out for their team that what they do away from the facility impacts the ability for the team itself to stay on the field.
This is definitely big for those, not only for the team to stay on the field, but even the more humane side of that is so many of these players have families that they want to go home to at the end of the day. They have their families, they have children, they could be living with relatives who may be at more of a high risk pool. We don't know. So it's going to really be on the players who may not have that, who are kind of, I don't want to like generalize here, but if like you're a young 20, 21-year-old player who may not have those type of responsibilities at home, it's going to really be on those guys to then not after a game go out to some club and where they're going to be around tons of people and potentially then bringing the disease back to their teammates the very next day. So I'm assuming that's kind of what those meetings are going to kind of be like. Not only do we want to keep our team on the field, but also outside of that, a lot of us have families we want to go home to at the end of a game. So don't be selfish and go out and do, some party at some nightclub, because then you could be affecting us as a team, but also as human beings and our families. And that's a very legitimate thing to ask. So I don't see anything wrong with a player, maybe of a more veteran player, having that meeting with their entire team, being like, here's how it's got to be. We got 60 games to do this. After these 60 games, you can go do whatever the hell you want. But in the meantime, while we're here, have respect for not only our team, but us as human beings and do that. And that's kind of the thing we've been seeing all around the world right now about respect and wearing masks and things like that. So it's going to relate even to baseball this season. So it'll be interesting.
And I would think that one of the guys that we probably anticipate being that guy in the Tigers clubhouse is a guy like Matt Boyd, who is an asthmatic and is on the list of players who, if he would have the option to opt out, as he is a higher risk individual if he were to contract COVID-19. He has indicated that he is not opting out of this season, so that kind of gives him another leg to stand on for these guys of like, hey, I'm a higher risk guy. I am here to compete with you, but for that to continue on, you have to follow all of the safety protocols that are laid out of how we avoid bringing this into the clubhouse.
Yeah. Also, you said Matt Boyd. I believe you meant to say as seen on TV's Matt Boyd. You see, he was on CNN.
Yes, indeed. As seen on TV.
He was in an interview, and that's where he said pretty much, he was like, "Look, I'm asthmatic. I'm definitely more at a high risk, but at the same time, although that's scary, I cannot live my life in fear." And he said it's going to really be on us as players and teammates to kind of have each other's back there and making sure we're doing everything appropriately and up to the CDC standards and whatever standards and guidelines the MLB puts into place over the course of these next couple of months. And it's going to, this is really, baseball's always been a team sport, but now it's not even now, it is not even only now a team sport. This is now a human sport, and being humane to your fellow brothers on the team and that guys you look at as like family. So it's going to be very fascinating to see how this all unfolds. But yeah,
And guys, and a guy like Gardy, who is a transplant recipient, and so also similarly high risk individual, will be coming back to manage this season, and has given no indication that he would not come manage this season, but has also expressed concerns about coming back and managing this season. And so I hope that those types of presence in the Tigers clubhouse will help these guys, these younger guys, kind of really, if they aren't taking it as seriously as they may have been, to really hammer home the idea that we gotta really be in this together. It's a community thing.
Yeah, and I don't see, and there's not like any names that are coming to mind that'll be like the young rebel rousers, so to speak, that want to like fight the system and go out and party after games, and like I don't really foresee that happening. But also at the same time, I don't think the Tigers will allow that to happen. Yep. So it's kind of, even if we do have those quote unquote troublemakers, that's what you want to call them, I don't know. I don't think the team will allow it. But as I said, again, I'm not worried about that. I think there's enough mutual respect on this team that people will do that for one another. And that's what makes me happy to be a Tiger fan. So
yeah, you think about like it really is like a very blue collar sense of the organization, that it's really like, let's show up to work, let's do the work, and then like the most we know that these guys like to do in their downtime is go play video games, and that's a great activity for them to go home and do, is go play a video game.
And now's a great time too. A lot of players on their days off, which by the way they won't have a ton of days off to really go out and act like
60 and 66,
something like that. Yeah. So, but a lot of times when players do take days off, they go golfing, and that's a great other thing. If you want to, if you need to get out, a perfectly fine social distance activity to do. I should know. I do it every weekend. I usually golf like dog crap, but that's for another episode of the podcast.
Yeah, you think about the advantage to, I think, that all the teams in the central divisions, because the teams in the central divisions are not in cities that have a great club scene. No one's really talking about the great clubs in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're in Cleveland for a week. I gotta get out and hit the clubs.
Yeah. Chicago's good for like bars and stuff, but even then, so right now, so many things are still closed in the city. I think you can do rooftop bars and patio bars, but you can't go into some crowded dive bar and just drink with your buddies. So yeah, that's a fair point. You don't have the lure of California. And you have to imagine for a lot of teams, although I guess now the tune is kind of different in like Florida, because I think Florida just closed down all their bars again.
They just reshut them down. So
they just reshut them down because their cases have been spiking.
Yeah, exactly. You can't go drink in a bar in Florida right now.
So imagine had that not happened. And then if you're a team like the Marlins or the Rays, or teams like the Rangers or the Astros in Texas, where that was they were fairly more loose with their guidelines, that would be cause for a much more legitimate concern amongst those teams. Because even if the bars are open and the clubs are open, and you go to a place like Miami that has a great nightlife, that is something I would be concerned of if I was a fan or a player of those teams, that like, oh crap. Now there's no rules that won't stop these guys from going out. Now it's the only rules that are in place are their own decisions. But this could also be a thing too. Excuse me. This could be a thing too, where maybe teams just come out and straight up make a rule that, hey, if we're on the road or, whatever it might be, there's a curfew at 9 p.m. You are to be in your hotel room starting at 9 o'clock. Maybe they go that route for the 60-game season. I mean, I think that's a legit thing we could see, teams implementing when they're on the road, to do that. I mean, obviously it gets a little bit more tricky when you're at home. What are you going to say? Like, don't leave your house past 9 o'clock. How dare you? But maybe when they're on the road, we do see some sort of forced curfew. So who knows?
Yeah, and so we were just sort of alluding to that. There are 27 markets in Major League Baseball, and in those 27 markets, 15 of them have seen a recent spike in COVID cases, and so that's obviously something that Major League Baseball is keeping an eye on. There will also be contingency plans if public health officials deem it unsafe to play in their home parks. You'd have to imagine that in the case of Detroit, that would mean we would go down to Toledo and play in Toledo, or if we can't play in Michigan for whatever reason. One of the interesting cases is obviously the Toronto Blue Jays. What do you do if we are unable to cross the Canadian border? And we still have not yet quite seen a final plan if they'll be able to play at the Rogers Center, or if they have to. I've seen reports that they may go to Tampa. They may play in Tropicana, or they may go to double up with a fellow East region team and figure out that. So there's a lot of that's the big question mark there, and that's the thing that will be interesting too as the season unfolds, as some of these cases kind of as we get closer, especially Houston is a market that has been named of the public health, whoever the main public health official is in Houston has made comment that, he's not afraid to shut baseball down in Houston if he needs to. And I think that's good. He should not be afraid to shut baseball down in Houston. There are many stadiums in many parts of the country that these teams can go to if that's what they need to do. And I hope that both of them, and ultimately, as much as I don't want the season to be shut down, Rob Manfred does have the authority again to shut it down if that's what he needs to do. Luke, now as we look at kind of this caseload, how are you feeling as a fan of the sport in terms of the responsibility of Major League Baseball in terms of keeping an eye on these things?
Well, we've said it a bunch of times on past shows that although we're excited to have a season and hopefully watch the Tigers go out and win a World Series, the first and foremost thing that is of a top priority is everyone's safety. And that's why, although I'm super excited that we're getting a season here in less than a month, I will admit there is a little bit of I guess would be, I'm a little skeptical in the back of my brain, kind of being like, okay, just, cool your jets. There's a lot of cases going on right now. We just don't know. Now, granted, I know you're in Florida right now for the time being, but you're being safe. Let's throw that out there. You're being very safe, even though you're in a state right now that's kind of flying off the rails. I'm in Illinois at the time about this recording, and we're doing very well. Cases continue to decline. Masks are required everywhere you go out in public. I mean, if you're outside eating, you can take a mask off. But if you're waiting in a line at the grocery store, got to have a mask on, shopping, whatever it might be. So our cases continue to, definitely be at a safer level. So it would be a little bit frustrating if it's like, well, because states like Texas and Florida and Georgia, they're on the rise so much, now we've got to shut it down because of teams like that. And I don't think it would ever really come to that. I don't imagine. They would probably just have to relocate them at a very quick pace. Maybe they are coming up more further north to stadiums up here, and I don't know, maybe the Braves are sharing a stadium with the Cardinals or something. I don't know in that kind of scenario. But Major League Baseball's number one job is the player safety, the umpiring crew members, television, whoever it might be. It's just making sure that who's ever entering these stadiums is safe. And that should be the number one goal. And, it's everything we've heard. It sounds like testing will be readily made available to everybody at pretty much a moment's notice. So that's good. And, we'll just kind of go after that. They can social distance only to so much. We've seen Major League Baseball, they put the one rule into effect: no spitting, no chewing sunflower seeds. I'm very curious to see how they're going to uphold those rules. That'll be interesting. I'm assuming if you're caught doing it on camera, if whatever it might be, maybe a fine is sent your way. I don't know, but they have a very tall task at hand. But their number one task over just making sure we get through a season is the safety of everybody involved. So as long as they do that, I'm pretty much game for whatever happens after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. I would much rather see them relocate all the teams out of Texas as an example and say, let's figure out where these guys can go play their games. And certainly that is unfortunate for the team that suddenly no longer has a home stadium, quote unquote. But the real advantage of being the home team in baseball is you get to bat at the bottom of the inning. And so it's less important that you're in your home park. As long as you get the advantages of being a home team. Obviously you like to be home, but at a certain point that it is, ultimately 66 days is the length of this season. And so if that means that you have to be on the road and in a hotel locked away for 2 to 3 months, that is certainly not ideal and definitely is not fun by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely is ultimately better for the safety of everybody involved. And I'd rather see them take those steps than shut it down again once we get rolling.
Yeah. And did you?
All right. Well, those of you that are listening to the audio version of this or looking at the video version, you'll have noticed a fade and a cut there that just happened. We had a little bit of technical difficulties during the recording process. But so we're just going to move into the next story about who's going to go to camp, who's going to camp, who's making the 60-man roster for the Tigers. We are recording this on Sunday afternoon. 60-man roster submissions were due to the league office by noon today, so we don't have final rosters, but we do have a good sense of who's likely going to be in camp. And then we have a little bit of conversation about guys that we hope we would see, and maybe we'll look like idiots on Monday morning as this comes out, because they aren't on the 60-man roster, but that's okay. It'll be an interesting conversation nonetheless, talking about those developments. So Luke, 60-man roster, we got a couple of options. Let's start at pitching.
Okay.
And the guys that we will likely see. So starting pitchers, obviously, we'll have Boyd, Turnbull, Nova, Zimmerman, Norris, Fulmer, Alexander. Then we have Mize, Manning, Skubal, Faedo, Xiao Xingxiang, Dario Agrazal. Some guys that are options there. What do we think?
Those, I mean, pretty much every name that you just mentioned are names we anticipated to be seeing. Couple new names, some new faces, things like that, but there's no huge surprises there for me on that one. Good to see the new guys included, the young bucks coming up through the system, but no huge surprises on my end. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of these guys are certainly guys that you want to see on the taxi squad that are going to be hanging out and working down in Toledo for much of this camp, for much of this season. And like we talked about at the beginning, like I would love to see a potential scenario where it opens up optionality for us at the trade deadline for what we do, because that's pretty well for a team, for a franchise that doesn't have a great rotation right now. That's a pretty healthy list of starting pitchers that most teams would be happy to look at and see.
One guy I don't really talk a lot about, but I think he's going to stick around for a while. At least I feel like. I could be totally wrong on this, but Spencer Turnbull, I don't feel like he's going anywhere anytime soon. I think there's some potential there with him, and I'll be curious to see how he does kind of in his second season with the team. But yeah, it's the usual suspects. There's no huge names that really, at least for the guys who will be making the team out of camp. It's going to be Boyd, Nova, Zimmerman, Turnbull, Fulmer. It'll be great to see Fulmer back. I mean, that's going to be awesome. So Daniel Norris and whatnot. So it'll be fun to see.
I'm not going to name any of these relievers that we likely will see at camp. What are your biggest concerns and excitements about the relievers available?
So the ones that I'm excited about are those guys kind of from the article that we're reading off MotorCityBengals.com. The guys that are highlights. So you got Franklin Perez, Kyle Funkhauser, Bo Burrows, Nick Ramirez, Zach Godley. In particular, a guy like Bo Burrows and Franklin Perez and Funkhauser, those are some names we've been hearing for a while. So definitely excited to kind of see them come and make their debuts. I think it was Franklin Perez I've always heard is going to definitely has potential to be like a setup guy for the future. So that's good. Bo Burrows is a name we've been hearing for a long time. So excited to hear that. And I think Funkhauser has definitely been projected to come up earlier, but I think he's battled injuries in the past, which have kind of slowed his arrival down. So, and then beyond that, it's kind of the usual suspects. Buck Farmer is still around. Joe Jimenez is around. And I like Joe. I think he's got some potential. It's only his third season. So, I mean, I'm not ready to just cast him off yet. He had a great rookie season, made the All-Star team last year, wasn't as good as we would have hoped. So this is going to be kind of a nice third year, kind of see where he goes from here. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same story with the bullpen, it's just kind of whatever.
Yep. That's sort of the big question mark for this franchise always and moving forward is the bullpen. And so I don't know that there's a whole lot more to say beyond what you said. So let's look at the infield a little bit. We obviously have Miguel Cabrera will be in camp, CJ Cron, Jonathan Shoup, Nico Goodrum, Candelario, Castro, Mercer, Schwindel, Castro again, Lugo, Paredes, Pinero, Clemens, Alcantara, Torkelson, Vargas. So obviously the couple of names here that we want to kind of really take a look at. Spencer Torkelson, should Torque be in camp?
Yeah, sure. Why not? What else do we have to lose? Honestly, we got nothing else to lose. I have a question for you, real quick. Maybe we can help each other out here.
Let's learn.
How do you pronounce? Is it Isaac? How did you say? I keep calling him Paredes. How did you pronounce his last name, Isaac?
I went Paredes, but that is
Paredes.
Absolutely wrong. I think Paredes
I don't.
Is correct.
I said Paredes, and I know this. It's Jonathan. I know this one. Jonathan Scope, like the toothbrush.
Yeah. Scope.
Or a scope on a gun. Yeah, scope. But it does not look that way at all.
No, it doesn't. It really threw me off. It's really so.
When you said I don't remember what you said, Paradise, and I was like, that kind of sounds right. But I was like, no, maybe I don't know. Anyway, sorry. I've never pretended to be an English major, folks. So please. But let's go back to the question at hand, though, what you were asking.
I agree. Torque should definitely be in camp because the worst thing that happens is he's more ready than the organization may even think he is. And then Cody Clemens, a guy like Cody Clemens, what do you think?
Rookie. I mean, definitely got to see him a little bit in spring training. Was doing fairly well from what I can recall. So all of my opinion on all of these rookies that we might be like, should we bring them up? Should we not? Like, should they make the 60? Should they not make the 60? Why not? We got nothing to lose. Let's give them a try. So any one of these players who are kind of on the bubble, so to speak, I say let's give it a go.
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy entirely. Is that these are the guys, they're the future of the organization. That certainly there's you don't want to just torch contract money with some of these other guys, but there's not that much money tied up in a lot of these other guys' contracts, and so let's kind of look at this season as a chance to be surprising because we're young, gain some experience for those guys, and get them moving that way, and get them into camp and into Detroit kind of as quickly as possible. So the catcher situation, Luke. Austin Romine, Haas, Greiner, Rogers, Cooper Johnson is sort of the one that Motor City Bengals here has highlighted as like maybe.
I don't even know who that guy is. I'm sorry. I never. Yeah, must have been a spring training guy I wasn't too familiar with.
Yeah, he's still in West Michigan. In terms of where he is in the franchise, but obviously the Whitecaps aren't playing this year, so maybe bring him there. I don't really know that. The catcher situation is so interesting because not on that list is.
Dylan Dingler.
It's Dylan Dingler, our recent draft pick. And so I don't really know why you would bring Johnson, but not Dingler in that scenario. So I would rather you bring in the draft pick who we just.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see Austin Romine as our starter, and then kind of Grayson Greiner and Jake Rogers will kind of maybe battle it out after the fact. I mean, my goal for this season is just to keep having Jake Rogers develop. I still think he's the catcher of the future. Guy needs some time to grow and kind of earn a spot, or maybe even lose it. Let him determine his own fate, so to speak. So hopefully a season with Austin Romine, who's a veteran catcher, maybe them getting kind of work together. And unfortunately, I said, I think on last week's show, Grayson Greiner is just kind of like in this weird in between. Like last year, he was the starting catcher, but he was even on borrowed time last year because we all knew Jake Rogers was coming. And now not only is Jake Rogers there, you got to worry about a guy named Dylan Dingler at some point coming down the road. And then you've got a veteran starting over you in Austin Romine. So it's just kind of, there's a lot of names being thrown around right now. And I said it again last week too, I'm pretty sure, about Jamer Candelario. I mean, all those names we just listed for the infield, there's a lot of people fighting for positions. And I don't know if we'll necessarily see like battles in our little condensed spring training 2.0, but there's a lot of question marks. But I guess that's kind of the nice thing of having the 60 man, so to speak, is you can bring those question marks with you and then swap guys out when you see fit. So it'll be interesting. Yeah. But the catcher position, I want Jake to get some experience under his belt. And I think this is a good season for him to do that with a guy like Romine, who will probably be the starter.
So then going to the outfield, the big question obviously is, do we bring Riley Green to camp? And my sense is that your answer is going to be, yeah, why not? So then I will follow it with this question of Riley Green is on your taxi squad. Do we potentially see Riley Green at any point in Detroit in the 60-game season? What's the scenario that Riley ends up coming to Detroit?
Oh, sheesh. If he makes the 60 man and he's on the taxi squad, let's say, and if he has a chance to come up, and this might sound kind of morbid, but if Riley Green, because I don't think they're going to want to rush a guy like Riley Green, and I don't even think they're going to necessarily rush guys like Casey Mize and Faedo and Scooble and that crew. Same thing, you can make probably an argument for Torque. I don't know if they're in a hurry to really rush him this season, but, and maybe this is a fair point to make, if we see a large number of those guys coming up at a point in time, it then might be safe to say that the reason they're up is due to players on the team testing positive. Yeah. And maybe that's the scenario. And I don't mean to make light of coronavirus or, throw out a morbid hypothetical here, but if you're seeing a guy like Riley Green, who I think going into this season, the team really doesn't want him probably playing at the major league level, you're probably seeing him. It's because players have tested positive and they need someone. Yeah. And if they need someone, well, why not give one of our brightest stars of the future a chance in a truncated season? So I know it's a little bit doom and gloom, but that's maybe the only scenario I see him getting his chance. Now, who knows? He could go into camp, kill it, and they start him out of the gate, but I don't foresee that happening.
No, I definitely think that one reason I posed that question is because I was kind of hoping you would bring about that scenario, because I think that it is important. Like, there's a lot of us that are very excited about Riley Green, and I think that Riley is going to be a great Tiger in the future.
Absolutely.
It's not right now. The moment is not now. But I do also think that it would be foolish if we wake up tomorrow and we look at the rosters as they're reported, and Riley's name isn't on the roster going to camp. I think that it makes sense to bring him to the taxi squad, to let him play with these guys that are going to be his teammates at the future. And I think that that's really important. Now, my next hypothetical for you here, Luke, we get to that midpoint. We need a power bat. Do we bring Torkelson into that fold?
That's a tricky one, because that's a lot of pressure to put on him. If we get to that trade deadline scenario and we don't really want to go out and buy a bat or trade for a bat, but because we know we have a good one looming on our taxi squad,
with that scenario, what we have is that what we are seeing in him playing in the taxi squad is that he's hitting guys like Mize, Manning, Faedo really well.
Yes, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. It could happen, because the only thing I worry about, though, then if you do that puts a lot of potential pressure on him, because, sometimes when you get called up, it's different for scenarios when guys get called up. I mean, we saw like last year, Jake Rogers got called up in July. He had nothing to lose. They were well out of it. But you call up a guy in the middle of a race, so you're fighting for the division. There's going to be more pressure that goes. There's going to be more eyes. There's going to be like, okay, we're fighting for the AL Central, and on top of it, the Tigers arguably just called up one of their top 3 minor league guys. So now there's even more pressure on it. I don't know. Maybe you do it. I again don't see an issue with it. I mean, this season's already going to be so weird, so why not? But that's just kind of my own opinion.
Yeah, this is going to be a particularly interesting season to be a commentator about, because it's such a weird season. It's so unprecedented, and it is super easy for us to be sitting here and being like, "Yeah, bring him up, like do it." I don't know
what are you losing.
What are we losing here? And obviously Gardy knows what we might be losing if we do that. But I also have to think that, when you have this guy who has competed at a high level in the college game, obviously the college game is different from Major League Baseball, but he is certainly, it's not the same. Bringing up Torque in that scenario is not the same thing as bringing up Riley Green in a scenario like that, where we know that Riley can hit bombs. We've seen him do it, but we have not yet really seen Riley do it at sort of a particularly high level.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. These guys all might be on the same taxi squad together, which will most likely looks like it will happen. But I'm going to be more, eager or looking forward to a guy like Casey Mize, and I let me put it this way, I will be expecting a guys like Casey Mize to get called up to the major league team before Riley Green, and that's just a simple fact of look where they were at before everything happened this season. Casey Mize is going to I think last year he ended up in AAA pitching, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So I mean, they were there, and Riley Green was, I think, in West Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So Riley Green maybe was going to start the season at Lakeland. Maybe if he was really good, Double-A, but it was probably looking more like that low A, Class A kind of thing. So just their trajectories are just so kind of staggered right now. That's why I don't expect to see a guy like Riley Green. But who knows? This is all so who knows what's going on and out of the blue. Maybe Guardy's just like, forget it. Throw him in there. Let him see what he does. We just don't know. I don't foresee that happening, but we just, at the end of the day, we don't know.
Yeah, and I think it'll be all very interesting in the next couple of weeks how this all shakes out, and we will be here with you here at Michigan and Trumbull most every week talking about that. We are going to take next week off in prep for the sprint of the season, not the marathon of the season, but the sprint of the season. So don't look for us next Monday, but look for us on Facebook Live throughout the next couple weeks. And also we will be back the week after next with a new episode, getting ready to preview the season, talking about what's happening in spring training so far, and probably bringing you some updates on where things stand in light of the pandemic and how things may be changing that way. But we will be here. Tell your friends, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you like us on Facebook. We do put all these episodes up on YouTube as well, if you prefer watching on YouTube. So you can head over there and watch that. Luke, thanks for another great week.
Yeah, buddy. You too. Stay safe down there in the Sunshine State, and hopefully see you up here soon.
I will. Yes, indeed. I will mostly just continue spending time out by the pool.
Now, I can't blame you there at all. That sounds just terrific. So keep doing that.
Safest place to be. Have a good week.
All right. See you, buddy.